the photograph that should not exist. The first time Adelaide Hart saw his face, it was printed in sepia, and something deep in her chest, a place she didn't know how to voice, whispered, "There you are." The university archives smelled of paper rot and lemon polish. A scent that suggested preservation and decay were locked in a polite, eternal argument. Dust motes drifted like slow-motion constellations in amber shafts of afternoon light. It was the sort of place where time thinned out and behaved strangely, where the past didn't feel like a foreign country, but a room just next door. She liked it there for that very reason. It felt like a sanctuary for secrets. As a graduate student in Gothic literature, she spent most afternoons buried in records most students would never think to open. Enrollment registries from the 1920s, the ink faded to a ghostly blue. Faculty directories from wartime years, the pages brittle as dead leaves. Old yearbooks bound in cracking leather that left a fine, ancient dust on her fingertips. She told herself it was for her thesis. It wasn't entirely untrue. Her research focused on immortality in 19th century fiction, the seduction of permanence, the horror of eternal life. Why humans romanticized what would inevitably unmake them. She was, in essence, studying the ache of time. She had always been drawn to the idea of preserved things. Old buildings with their layered histories, old letters with their trapped emotions, old names that whispered of lives fully lived. It was a form of longing she couldn't quite name. She was halfway through a 1924 faculty yearbook, the leather warm under her palm, when she found him. The photograph stopped her breathing for a moment, not because it was unusual. It wasn't. A formal academic portrait, a young professor, standing rigidly in a dark suit. Severe posture, an expression as unreadable as a locked door. But his face, sharp cheekbones that caught the light like cut stone, pale eyes, the color of winter sky, that seemed to look not at the camera but through it, through the decades, directly at her. Hair swept back, darker at the roots but lighter at the crown, as if perpetually kissed by a silvered light. The same faint, controlled line of the mouth, a mouth that looked like it knew the weight of secrets. It was not a resemblance. It was him. The name beneath the photograph, printed in elegant serif font, read, Professor Alistair Vale, Department of Comparative Literature. Her pulse stumbled, a clumsy beat against her ribs. Adelaide blinked, leaned closer, her nose almost touching the page. No senior, no junior, no two. Just the name. As if he were the only one. As if he always had been. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her from the strange spell. She ignored it, because Professor Alistair Vale was currently employed at the university. His faculty profile, with its crisp, modern headshot, was bookmarked on her laptop at home, and she was scheduled to attend his first lecture in less than an hour. She stared at the year printed at the bottom of the page, 1924. The photograph was not faded beyond recognition. It was clear. Intimate. Unmistakable. The man in that photograph looked no older than 30. Her professor, according to the faculty website, was 34. A lifetime of logic screamed coincidence. A relative. A grandfather who happened to share his features and his name. Some families bred symmetry, but something inside her, something quiet and observant that had always been drawn to the uncanny, did not accept that answer. It felt like a dismissal of something significant. She took a picture of the page with her phone, the camera's click unnaturally loud in the silence. Then she closed the yearbook slowly, as if sealing a ghost back inside its vault. The lecture hall was already full when she arrived, buzzing with a nervous energy she recognized. Word had spread. It always did when a new professor joined mid-semester, especially one whose faculty photo had been circulated in group chats with far too many flame emojis. Adelaide took a seat in the second row, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid attention. She preferred proximity to knowledge. The room hummed with low conversation. Girls whispering, laughter edged with anticipation. A girl in the front row reapplied her lip gloss, glancing at the door. Adelaide rolled her eyes inwardly at herself. You're being dramatic, she thought. It's just a man in a suit. Then the door opened. The air changed. It was subtle at first, like the shift in barometric pressure before a storm, a thickening of the atmosphere that made your skin prickle with awareness. He walked in without hurry. Tall, well-built beneath a tailored black jacket that whispered of expense and quiet taste. His movements were economical, controlled, a kind of fluid precision that suggested both discipline and a deep, physical restraint. His hair was exactly as in the photograph. Dark at the sides, lighter at the crown, swept back in deliberate disarray. His jaw was sharp enough to cut, lips sculpted into something that was neither smile nor frown, but a quiet, watchful stillness. But it was his eyes that struck her. Pale, not colorless, not exactly gray, but light in a way that made you hyper-aware of your own gaze, of the act of looking. They were the eyes of someone who had been looked at for a very long time. They moved across the room once, and every conversation died, not abruptly, but as if the sound had been gently, firmly leached from the air. The girls in the front row straightened unconsciously, a collective, instinctive preening. A nervous laugh rippled somewhere behind her, and was immediately swallowed by the silence. He placed his leather briefcase on the desk at the front of the room with a soft, deliberate thud. The sound was intimate in the quiet. "Good afternoon," he said. His voice was low, smooth, a baritone that seemed to vibrate not just in the ears but in the chest, a physical sensation. It wasn't loud, but it carried effortlessly, wrapping around every person in the room. There was no hesitation in him. No adjustment period. No flicker of the social awkwardness that usually accompanied new faculty. He belonged here, in this moment, as if he had simply been waiting for it to arrive. "I'm Professor Vale," silence answered him. Adelaide's fingers tightened around her pen until her knuckles whitened. Because up close, in full color, in 3 dimensions, radiating a presence that felt too large for the room, he was undeniably the man in the photograph. He began lecturing without notes. He spoke about immortality in romantic literature, Byron, Polidori, Mary Shelley, and her monster. His references were precise, his analysis sharp, his mind a finely honed instrument. But what unsettled her was not his intelligence. It was his familiarity. He spoke of the Romantic era not as a scholar, but as a contemporary. He described the salons of Geneva, the fevered conversations by the firelight, with a casual, first-hand intimacy that made her skin prickle. He spoke of the men whose names he pronounced as if he had known them, had argued with them, had watched them die. She felt foolish for thinking it. And yet, at one point he paused mid-sentence, his discourse on the Byronic hero hanging in the air. His gaze, which had been sweeping the room, suddenly shifted. Locked onto hers, not accidentally. Deliberately, her breath stalled in her throat, a small trapped thing. It was not the look of a professor noting a student. It was the look of someone recognizing something. Something expected. Something long awaited. His pale eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Curiosity flickered in their depths, a quick, sharp flame. Then something else. Restraint. A door closing softly but firmly. The moment lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Then he looked away, seamlessly continuing his lecture. But Adelaide felt it like a hand at her throat, a gentle but undeniable pressure that made her pulse hammer in her ears. The air in the room, already charged, now felt thick enough to swim through. By the end of the lecture, every female student in the room was affected. It was subtle, not hysteria, not obsession, but attention. Heightened. A lingering awareness. He had not flirted. Had not smiled warmly. Had not encouraged familiarity, yet the atmosphere pulsed faintly with something charged, like static before lightning. He was a magnet, and they were all just iron filings. Adelaide gathered her books slowly. She waited. She did not know why. Students filtered out in clusters, whispering, their voices hushed and reverent. He remained at the desk, organizing papers with measured precision, his long fingers moving with a deliberate grace that was hypnotic to watch. When the room emptied, she approached. Her pulse betrayed her calm exterior, hammering against her ribs. The scent of him reached her before she spoke, clean, male, with an undertone of something ancient and resinous, like cedar wood and old paper, and a faint smoky spice that made her think of winter fires. "Professor Vale?" He looked up, and up close, she understood why the room had shifted when he entered. There was something contained about him, like a predator choosing not to move. A stillness that was not peace, but potential energy. His gaze moved over her face with quiet assessment. She felt catalogued, her features noted and filed away in that ageless mind. Yes. His voice was even softer now, more intimate without the need to project. "I was reviewing some archival material for my thesis today," she said carefully, holding his gaze. "And I came across a photograph. From 1924. She watched him closely. He did not flinch, not a muscle. It was the stillness of a man who had spent a very long time learning not to react. "I see," he replied evenly. The 2 words held no inflection, gave nothing away. It was a faculty yearbook. Silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the frantic beat of her own heart. "And?" he prompted softly. It was an invitation, not a dismissal. He was giving her rope. She swallowed, her throat dry. There was a professor listed. Alistair Vale. The faintest pause, a beat of silence that felt like a held breath. Then, "It's not an uncommon name. It was your name." Stillness. The air between them thickened, became a palpable thing. She could feel it. The moment before truth rearranges itself, the universe holding its breath. But instead of denial, he offered something else. A small, unreadable smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a smile of acknowledgement, not of mirth. "Ah," he said, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something ancient flicker behind his pale eyes. Not a monster, but a weariness. A depth that was terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. "You must have mistaken a relative. Was he?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. His gaze sharpened, the pale irises becoming almost luminous. Her question had been too direct. It had breached some unspoken boundary. He leaned back slightly, folding his arms across his chest, a gesture that was both protective and dismissive. The movement drew her attention to the breadth of his shoulders, the contained power in his frame. "I would advise you," he said, his voice lowering to a tone of velvet-wrapped steel, "not to let curiosity distract you from your thesis. The archives can be a labyrinth. It's easy to get lost in them." It wasn't a threat. But it wasn't a dismissal either. It was a warning. A kind one, even. She felt it in her bones. A shiver that had nothing to do with cold. And yet the warning only tightened the hook. It confirmed, more than any denial could, that there was something to find. She nodded slowly, feigning acquiescence. "Of course." She turned to leave, her body thrumming with the awareness of his gaze on her back. "Miss Hart." She froze. He hadn't asked her name. The silence roared in her ears. She turned back, slowly. His expression was composed, but his eyes were not indifferent. They were dark with something that looked almost like longing, quickly suppressed. "Be careful," he said. The words were soft, but weighted with a meaning that went far beyond a simple lecture hall pleasantry. They were a plea. A prophecy. That night, Adelaide couldn't sleep. The photograph glowed on her phone screen in the dark, a ghost in her hand. She zoomed in repeatedly, comparing it to the faculty headshot she'd pulled up on her laptop. The bone structure was identical. The sharp angle of the jaw. The sculpted mouth. The eyes, that pale, unforgettable color. And the scar. A faint, vertical line just beneath his lower lip, a tiny imperfection on an otherwise perfect face. It was present in both images. A scar does not pass down genetically. It is a mark earned, a story written on the skin. Her heart began to pound harder, a frantic drum against her ribs. This wasn't resemblance. It was continuity. Her mind, trained to find patterns, to dissect texts for hidden meanings, began to assemble a terrifying narrative. She sat up in bed, the sheets pooling around her waist. Opened her laptop. Searched faculty employment records. Professor Vale had joined the university 2 weeks ago. Prior to that, he had taught at another institution for 9 years. Before that, a research fellowship abroad. Gaps. Long, unexplained gaps. The kind of gaps that swallowed decades. She searched deeper, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Property records. It took some digging, but she found it. He owned a house, a beautiful old Victorian, just beyond campus boundaries. The house had been purchased under the name Alistair Vale. Her stomach dropped as she read the date on the deed. 1898. The ownership had never transferred, never changed. For over 120 years, the house had belonged to one man. The same man. Her pulse thundered in her ears, a deafening roar. He was either A, a master criminal using stolen identity records spanning over a century, or B, not aging. The second option was impossible. It defied every law of biology, of physics, of reality itself. So why did it feel more plausible? Why did her skin prickle with a strange, electric thrill at the thought? She stared at the address on the screen, then at the photograph on her phone, then at the memory of his eyes on hers. Recognition. Not surprise. Recognition. As if he had known this moment would come. As if he had been waiting for her. Her phone buzzed. A text from a classmate. Is it just me, or is Professor Vale unreal? I can't stop thinking about him. She stared at the message, at the unintentional irony of the word unreal. Then she typed back. You have no idea. The next lecture was worse. He seemed sharper, more aware, and his gaze found her more often. Not prolonged, not inappropriate, but intentional. Each glance was a thread, pulling her into his orbit. She began to notice other things, the way his nostrils would flare almost imperceptibly when a student passed by too closely, as if he was scenting the air. He never drank from the water bottle on the desk, never ate during the long seminars. The fluorescent lighting seemed to irritate him. his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly when the afternoon sun slanted directly through the windows. He dismissed class precisely at dusk, always, as if the fading light was a signal only he could hear. Patterns. She thrived on patterns. And he was becoming one, a rhythm that drew her in, a mystery that demanded to be solved. By the end of the week, she had made her decision. She needed answers. And archives would not give them. Only proximity would. Only him. That evening, she followed him. It felt reckless. Insane. But curiosity had already become something else. Something closer to compulsion. A hunger she couldn't name. He walked home. No car, no headphones, no distractions. His pace was unhurried, but not slow. Like someone who had walked that route 1,000 times, in 1,000 different eras. His house stood at the edge of the older district. Tall, narrow windows like watchful eyes. Ivy, thick and ancient, crept up the stone walls, clinging like a lover. The kind of house that looked like it had been waiting. For what, she didn't know. Perhaps for her. He unlocked the door and stepped inside without looking back. She waited across the street, heart hammering against her ribs, her breath misting in the cool evening air. The sky darkened fully, a deep, bruised purple. Lights flickered on inside, warm, golden, impossibly inviting. Then stillness. She crossed the street before she could think herself out of it. Her feet moved of their own accord, pulled by a force stronger than logic. The gate creaked softly, a sound of protest in the quiet. Her pulse roared in her ears. This is insane. But she kept moving. The front door had not fully latched. It stood open a fraction of an inch, a sliver of darkness against the warm light within. An invitation. As if he knew she would come. As if he had left it open for her. She hesitated only once, her hand hovering over the cool, dark wood. Then she slipped inside. The air was cool, still, and fragrant with the same scent she'd caught in the lecture hall. Cedar, old paper, and that smoky, resinous spice. The interior was immaculate, but not modern. Antique furniture, polished to a deep, warm glow. Oil paintings in heavy gilt frames, their subjects watching her from centuries past. Beeswax candles flickered on side tables, their soft light far more forgiving than electricity. It did not feel staged. It felt preserved. Time lived differently here. It breathed slowly. Her own breath was shallow, a series of small, frightened gasps. She stepped further in, her eyes adjusting to the candlelight. The floorboards, ancient and wide, did not creak beneath her weight, as if the house itself was complicit in her intrusion. The door clicked shut behind her. She spun. He stood at the end of the hallway, a silhouette against the warm glow of a back room. Watching. Waiting. There was no surprise on his face, no anger. Just quiet acknowledgement, a weary acceptance. I was wondering, he said softly, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. How long it would take. Her heart leapt into her throat, a wild, panicked bird. You knew, she whispered. It wasn't a question. Yes, his voice held no mockery. Only inevitability. The weight of a very long time. You shouldn't be here, Adelaide. The way he said her name, with a familiarity that was both terrifying and thrilling, made something deep inside her unravel. It was a caress and a warning in 2 syllables. Then tell me I'm wrong, she demanded, her voice shaking but defiant. She took a step toward him, into the dim light. Tell me you're not the man in that photograph. Silence. The house felt suspended, holding its breath. The candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows on his face. Then he stepped closer. And closer. Until she could see the faint silver at the edges of his irises, the almost invisible lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke not of age, but of expressions repeated over millennia. He stopped barely an arm's length away, close enough that she could feel the strange, cool energy radiating from his body, a stark contrast to the heat she could feel blooming in her own. I am, he said. No hesitation. No performance. Just truth. A truth so vast and heavy it seemed to bend the air around them. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. That's impossible. Yes. Another step closer. He was so close now she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. He smelled of the night air, and that intoxicating, ancient scent. But not untrue. How? The word was a breath, a plea. His gaze softened slightly, the pale eyes warming with something that looked almost like tenderness. It was a shocking sight on that severe, controlled face. That, he said quietly, is a very long story. The candlelight flickered between them, painting them both in gold and shadow. And in that moment, suspended between fear and fascination, between the impossible and the undeniable, Adelaide realized something terrifying. She was not afraid of him. She was drawn to him. The pull she had felt in the lecture hall, the curiosity that had driven her here, it had all been a precursor to this. A raw, electric awareness of him as a man. Of the sculpted mouth that spoke of centuries. Of the strong hands that hung so still at his sides. Of the contained power in his body that was only a breath away from hers. And somewhere, deep beneath centuries of restraint, she saw it in his eyes. He was drawn to her too. It was a hunger as old as time, carefully leashed but undeniably present. It was the reason the door had been left open. The reason he had waited. The reason, she now understood with a shiver of pure electric terror, she had come. Chapter 2. The Long Story. For a moment, neither of them moved. The house seemed to settle around them, old wood and ancient stone exhaling softly, as if relieved that the inevitable had finally occurred. Adelaide could hear the faint, secret hiss of candle wicks and the distant, unhurried tick of some unseen clock. Time, here, did not rush. It coiled, patient and deep, like a serpent in the sun. "You should leave," Alistair said again, though there was less force behind it now. It sounded less like a command, and more like a ritual, as if he were obligated to say it, duty-bound by a code she couldn't yet understand. "And you should lie," she replied quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But you didn't." Something in his expression shifted, subtle, but real. A flicker appeared in the depths of those pale eyes. Amusement, perhaps. Or admiration. It was the first crack in his perfect composure, and she found herself wanting to see more. "You are very young to be this fearless." "I'm not fearless." Her heart was beating so hard she thought he must hear it. Maybe he could. The thought was strangely thrilling. "I'm just tired of being told not to look." His gaze dropped briefly to her throat, not lasciviously, not even hungrily, but with a deep, unsettling awareness. He was looking at the pulse fluttering there, just beneath the fragile skin, a tiny, frantic bird in a cage of bone and breath. When his eyes returned to hers, they were darker, the pale silver gone to a storm cloud gray. "I have buried women braver than you," he said softly. The words were not a boast, they were a dirge. Curiosity is not always a virtue. Sometimes it is simply the first step toward the grave. The words should have frightened her. They should have triggered every survival instinct a person possessed. Instead, they only deepened the gravity pulling her toward him. They were a warning, yes, but they were also an invitation to see the graves themselves. "Start talking," she said. For a long moment he studied her, as if weighing centuries of carefully constructed solitude against a single reckless night. The firelight played across the hard planes of his face, softening nothing. Then, with a decision so quiet she almost missed it, he turned away. "Very well." He walked down the hallway without checking if she followed. She did. Of course she did. Her feet moved of their own accord, pulled by a force stronger than any she had ever known. The room he led her into felt like the heart of the house. A study, lined floor to ceiling with books, leather spines in every shade of brown and oxblood and fading green, their surfaces smooth as skin from a century of handling. Some looked ancient enough to crumble at a touch. Others were merely old, their titles stamped in gold leaf that still faintly gleamed. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows that made the room feel alive, breathing. He did not light it while she watched. It was simply there, as if it had been waiting for her arrival. He moved to a heavy crystal decanter and poured 2 glasses of something dark. The liquid caught the candlelight like liquid garnet, warm and inviting. He handed one to her. She hesitated, her fingers brushing his for the briefest moment as she took it. His skin was cool, a shocking contrast to the warmth of the fire. "It's wine," he said dryly, a flicker of something sardonic in his gaze. "Not blood." Heat rushed to her cheeks, a furious, guilty bloom. "I didn't." "You did." The words were gentle, but they held the weight of absolute certainty. He had seen the thought flash through her mind as clearly as if she'd spoken it. She took the glass, wrapping her fingers around the cool stem to ground herself. He did not drink from his. Instead, he leaned back against the edge of the heavy oak desk, his body a study in deceptive relaxation. His arms folded loosely across his chest, the movement drawing her attention to the breadth of his shoulders and the powerful line of his thighs. He was a predator in repose, and the awareness of it made her skin prickle. "I was born in 1726, he said. The year fell between them like a stone dropped into deep water, the ripples spreading outward, touching everything. Adelaide's breath left her in a slow, soundless rush. In England, the son of a minor aristocrat who believed discipline was synonymous with love. His mouth curved faintly in a humorless smile. He was wrong. The cadence of his voice changed as he spoke, not theatrical, not nostalgic. Simply precise. It was as if he were recalling a conversation from yesterday, the details still sharp and unforgotten. I was not meant to outlive him, or anyone. He looked toward the fire, his profile sharp against the glow. The light traced the strong line of his jaw, the elegant slope of his nose, and the faint, intriguing scar beneath his lower lip. There was an illness, a fever that swept through London like a scythe through wheat. I contracted it in the winter of 1753. I remember the cold most of all, not the burning of the fever. The cold. It was a cold that came from inside, as if my very bones were turning to ice. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. The image was visceral, horrifying. I should have died. You didn't, she whispered, the words a breath of wonder and terror. No. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft crackle of the fire. How? She asked again, softer this time, the question no longer an accusation but a plea. His gaze flicked to hers, and in that moment, she saw something ancient and unknowable looking out from behind his eyes. I was not the only one who did not die. The words settled heavily in the room, dense with implication. There are others? Her mind leapt instinctively to myths, to secret societies, and to the creatures that haunted the pages of the Gothic novels she studied. Things with fangs and shadows? Things that went bump in the night? A few, he said, scattered across the world like fallen leaves. Most do not last. Why? Because eternity is not kind to the mind. His voice was flat, factual. It wears at the edges. It erodes the things that make us human. Hope, connection, the simple joy of a sunrise you know you have a limited number of. Without those limits, everything begins to blur. The fire cracked softly, a log settling in the grate. What happened to you? She pressed, needing to know, needing to understand the mechanism of this impossibility. A faint muscle moved in his jaw, the only sign of internal conflict. I woke 3 nights later. The fever gone, the weakness gone, the hunger. His voice trailed off, leaving the word hanging in the air like smoke. There it was, the word. Hunger. Adelaide swallowed, her throat dry. The image of him, waking in a cold London winter, ravenous for something he couldn't yet name, was terrifying and pitiful in equal measure. You need blood. He looked almost bored, a mask of studied indifference. Yes, the bluntness of it stole her breath. It was a fact of his existence, as mundane as breathing was for her. And you've just lived like this? For 300 years? 300, he corrected calmly, a hint of that sardonic amusement returning. Not 302. She stared at him, trying to reconcile the man before her, elegant, articulate, devastatingly attractive, with the creature he claimed to be. Why teaching? A faint smile ghosted over his mouth, the first genuine expression of warmth she'd seen. Books do not age the way people do. They are loyal companions. Universities are places where time pretends to be orderly. The semesters turn, the students come and go. But the rhythm remains the same. It is comfortable, a place to hide in plain sight. And the photograph? I taught here before, he said simply, as if discussing a previous job at a different company. Her stomach flipped. In 1924, yes. And before that? She was pushing, she knew, but she couldn't stop. His gaze sharpened slightly, assessing her. You are very thorough. Answer me. A pause. The word fell from his lips like a stone into still water. Yes, her mind reeled, trying to construct a timeline that spanned centuries. You just leave. Change locations. Wait a few decades. Come back. Yes. As who? Myself. He said it with a faint, ironic lift of one eyebrow. Vanity, perhaps, or a stubborn refusal to become someone else. The name is a constant. She stared at him in disbelief. That's reckless. Not if one sleeps. The word hung in the air, heavy with new meaning. You sleep, for decades at a time. A kind of torpor. It slows everything. The hunger, the grief, the weariness. Like a coma? Something like that. A deep, dreamless nothing. It is the only true peace I have found. Her heart hammered. You disappear. I withdraw. From what? From people. His voice cooled slightly, a door closing. From attachments. She understood then, with a clarity that was almost painful. You outlive them. Yes. The simplicity of the answer made her chest ache. The weight of it, the cumulative grief of watching everyone you love turn to dust, was unimaginable. How many? She asked quietly. His eyes shifted away, focusing on the fire. Enough. The single word held an ocean of loss. Enough that I stopped counting. Enough that I stopped trying. The firelight caught the faint scar beneath his lip. She found herself wanting to trace it, to learn its story with her fingertips. The impulse was shocking in its intimacy. Why wake up now? She asked. That, finally, unsettled him. It was the smallest flicker, barely perceptible, a tightening of the skin around his eyes. but she saw it. I did not intend to, he said. Something electric moved through her, a current that sparked in the air between them. What do you mean? I had planned to sleep another 20 years. The house was sealed. The arrangements were made. His voice was low, controlled, but there was a new tension in it. Her pulse spiked. But you didn't. No. Why? Silence. The house seemed to lean closer, the very walls listening. His gaze returned to her face, slower this time. Intent. He looked at her as if she were a text he was trying to decipher, a mystery he had not anticipated. I heard you. The words barely existed above a whisper, yet they filled the room. Her mind struggled to process them. That's not possible. You spend a great deal of time in the archives, he said. You speak when you read. Softly. To yourself. You argue with the authors. You laugh at the footnotes. You sigh when you find a passage that moves you. Heat rushed to her skin, a deep, embarrassed flush. He had been listening to her. For how long? You. I have excellent hearing. His voice was quiet, devoid of mockery. Even in torpor there is a kind of awareness. A thread connecting me to the world. Yours was the first voice I had heard in decades that sounded alive. Truly alive. You woke up because of me? His jaw tightened. I woke up because something pulled me back. A force I did not anticipate and could not resist. Me, she breathed. It wasn't a question. He did not answer. But he did not deny it. The realization bloomed inside her, terrifying and intoxicating. She was the reason a 300-year-old creature had clawed his way back from oblivion. The power of it, the sheer improbability, made her dizzy. She set her wine down on the desk because her hands were shaking, the glass clinking softly against the wood. That's insane. Yes. Why me? Her voice was barely a whisper. He stepped closer, not touching, never touching, but the space between them grew thick, charged with a heat that had nothing to do with the fire. You are not like the others. His voice was a low rumble that she felt in her chest. Her heart thudded violently against her ribs. How? You look at me, he said, his pale eyes holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. And you do not only see a man. You do not only see a professor, or a curiosity, or a challenge. Her breath caught. You see the question, he continued, his voice dropping even lower. The why of me. The how. And you do not look away from the answer, even when it is impossible. Yes. The word was a surrender, and you do not look away. He repeated it, softer now, marveling. From me. Silence swelled between them, thick and charged with an energy that felt older than the house, older than the fire, older than him. It was the raw, primal pull of attraction, sharpened by danger and deepened by the impossible. You should, he added quietly. The words were a warning, but his eyes were hungry. Why? His gaze dropped again to her throat, to her pulse, which was fluttering visibly now, a frantic, desperate rhythm. Because I am dangerous. He did not say it. He did not need to. It was written in the tension of his body, the way his hands had curled into fists at his sides, the way his nostrils flared slightly as he inhaled her scent. Have you ever killed anyone? She asked. The question sliced cleanly through the tension, sharp and unexpected. His eyes snapped back to hers, startled. Yes. The honesty was stunning, brutal. Her knees nearly buckled. Recently? No. When? He held her gaze, unflinching. Last century. The words hung in the air, monstrous and undeniable. Her mind supplied images, a dark alley, a struggle, a body crumpling. You say that like it's normal. It is. His voice was flat, devoid of justification. For me, for you. She repeated the words, testing their weight. Yes. She searched his face for cruelty. For sadism, for the gloating evil of the monsters in her books. She found none. Only a profound ancient weariness, the exhaustion of someone who has done terrible things and cannot undo them. You don't enjoy it, she said softly. It was not a question, no. The word was simple, honest. But you need it, yes. How often? Less than you think. There are ways to manage it, to take only what is needed and leave the rest alive. He paused. Mostly, she let that settle. And what happens if you don't? He held her gaze, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of the predator beneath the civilized surface. A warning. I grow weak. How weak? Enough that I might lose control. The admission felt like a confession, pulled from a deep, guarded place. Enough that the hunger becomes everything. And right now, her voice was a whisper, brave and terrified. The air shifted, the temperature seemed to drop, then spike. His eyes darkened, the pale irises swallowed by dilated pupils. I am not weak. Her breath stuttered in her chest. The meaning was clear. He was not starving, but he was aware, painfully, exquisitely aware. Of her, of the warmth of her body, a radiant heat he could probably feel from across the room. Of the sound of her heart, a quick, frantic drumbeat. Of the scent of her soap and paper, and the faint, clean salt of her skin. "You let me in," she whispered, the realization dawning. "Yes. Why?" It was the question that underlay all others. He stepped closer again, until only inches separated them. She could feel the strange, cool energy radiating from him, a palpable force field that made her skin prickle with awareness. He smelled of the night air and that intoxicating, ancient scent, cedar and smoke and something darkly sweet, like incense in an old church. "I am very tired of being alone." The vulnerability in the statement cracked something open inside her. 300 years of watching people wither and die, of leaving before they noticed he never did, of sleeping away decades to escape the relentless gnawing grief. The image of him, sealed in this beautiful silent house, dreaming for 20 years at a time, was the loneliest thing she had ever imagined. "You could have anyone," she said faintly, her mind struggling to comprehend why he would choose her, a 22-year-old graduate student, over the countless women who must have thrown themselves at him over the centuries. "I do not want anyone." The words wrapped around her, intimate and absolute. "I want." He stopped himself, his jaw clamping shut. "What?" she pressed, her voice barely a breath. She needed to hear it. His hand lifted slightly, hesitated, then dropped. The struggle was visible, a war fought in the taut lines of his body. "You." The word was not dramatic. It was not a hungry growl or a desperate plea. It was deliberate, chosen, a truth he had decided, in that moment, to lay at her feet. She felt the world tilt on its axis. "You don't even know me." A faint smile touched his mouth, a sad, beautiful thing. "I have known you for a week. That's not knowing. That's an impression. A fascination. For someone like me," he said quietly, his voice resonating in the space between them. "It is. I have lived long enough to know that what I feel when I look at you is not fleeting. It is not a whim. It is a recognition." Her pulse was a wildfire now, consuming every rational thought. "You're older than my country," she said, a last, desperate grasp at sanity. "Yes, and I'm 22. I am aware." His gaze was unwavering. "You're my professor, temporarily." The word was loaded with implication. The possibility stole her breath. "Are you going to disappear?" "Yes." The answer was immediate, without hesitation. Something sharp pierced her chest, a pain that was entirely unexpected. "When?" "Soon." His voice was gentle, but the word was a verdict. "Because of me?" She already knew the answer. Yes. The honesty hurt more than a lie would have. "I should never have opened that door. I should have let you believe I was merely a man with an old family name. But you did." "Yes." They stood there, breathing the same air, the fire whispering softly behind them. The proximity was intoxicating. She could see the individual threads of silver in the dark hair at his temples, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, and the way his chest rose and fell with breaths he didn't technically need. "You're not afraid of me," he observed. It was a statement of wonder. She searched herself for fear, for the primal scream that should have been echoing in her mind. There was none. Only heat. Only a gravity so strong, she felt she might fall into him, and never stop falling. "Should I be?" His hand lifted again. This time, it reached her. Slowly. Deliberately. It was as if he were giving her every opportunity to step back, to flinch away, to run. She didn't. His fingers brushed the side of her face. Cool. Not icy, but cooler than they should be. The contrast with her own flushed skin was electric, a jolt that went straight through her. Her breath hitched violently at the contact, a small, sharp sound in the quiet room. His thumb traced lightly along her cheekbone in a feather-like caress, as if confirming she was real, that she wasn't a dream his sleeping mind had conjured. His eyes changed. The restraint she had sensed since the lecture hall, the careful, deliberate control, flickered dangerously. Beneath it she saw something vast and dark, a hunger that went far beyond the physical. "You are very warm," he murmured. His voice was thick, roughened by something that sounded almost like pain. Her entire body responded to the low timbre of his voice, a shiver that started at the base of her spine and spread outward. "And you're not," she whispered. A faint smile. "No." His hand slid down from her cheek, the cool fingers trailing along the curve of her jaw with devastating slowness. He paused at her chin, tilting her face up slightly, his thumb resting just below her lower lip. She felt the touch everywhere. "You do not understand what proximity to me means." His voice was a low, rough whisper. "Then explain it." "It means temptation. His eyes dropped to her mouth. Constant, agonizing temptation. For you? For both of us. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, a barely there touch that made her knees weak. The air between them ignited. She could feel the charged space at the center of her chest, pulling her closer despite every rational thought screaming at her to run. It was a force of nature, undeniable and overwhelming. He leaned down slightly, not touching her lips. Not yet. He was close enough that she could feel the cool whisper of his breath on her skin. His eyes, dark and intense, searched hers, looking for permission, for hesitation, for fear. Adelaide, he said softly, and the way he said her name felt like something sacred and dangerous all at once. It was a prayer, and a warning. If you stay here tonight, nothing in your life will remain simple. The world you know, the future you imagined, it will all be different. Her breath trembled. It already isn't. Silence. The fire cracked again, a log crumbling in the grate. His gaze dropped to her mouth. Lingered. Then returned to her eyes. A lifetime of discipline was written in the tight lines of his face. Leave, he whispered. The word was a command, but his body was a contradiction. Leaning closer, drawn by a force he couldn't control, she did not move. His jaw tightened. Leave, he said again, rougher, more desperate. Instead, she lifted her hand, pressed her palm lightly against his chest. The fabric of his shirt was cool beneath her fingers. Beneath it, she felt the solid wall of muscle, the hard planes of his chest. And then she felt it, the absence. No heartbeat, no rhythmic thump of life. Just stillness. Her breath caught, a small, terrified sound. The reality of him, the true, inhuman reality, was there under her hand. Cold and still. You're not human, she whispered. The words were not an accusation, they were an acknowledgement. No, and I still want to know you. Something in him broke, not violently, but inevitably. A dam crumbling after centuries of pressure. His hand, still cradling her face, slid into her hair. Not forceful, not possessive. Just certain. His fingers tangled in the soft strands, anchoring himself to her. You have no idea, he murmured, his voice thickening, dropping to a register that was pure sensation. What you are inviting. You have no concept of the danger, the cost, the centuries of loneliness that I would pour into you if you let me. Then show me. The words left her before she could stop them. A challenge and a plea. The house seemed to hold its breath. The fire stilled. The shadows stopped dancing. For a split second, he closed his eyes. 300 years of discipline warred across his features. Longing, fear, hunger, hope. It was a battle fought in silence, and she watched every flicker of it. When he opened them again, they were darker. Hungrier. The pale silver was gone, swallowed by a depth of want that made her gasp. But they were still controlled. The predator was there, but the man was still in charge. He stepped back. There was just enough space to make the distance ache, to let the cool air rush in where his warmth, his coolness had been. His hand slipped from her hair, and she felt the loss like a physical blow. Not like this, he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, raw. Her pulse thundered, her body screaming in protest at the separation. Like what? Not when you do not understand the cost. He took another step back, putting the width of the hearthrug between them. Not when you are still human enough to break. What cost? She demanded, her own voice shaking. He held her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw the answer before he spoke it. It was a truth as old as he was, written in the lines of loss around his mouth. Everything. The word fell heavily into the silence. Your mortality. Your future. Your place in the sun. I would offer you eternity, Adelaide. But eternity is not a gift. It is a sentence, and once given, it cannot be taken back. Silence fell heavy and absolute between them, filled only by the crackling fire and the frantic beating of her heart. And Adelaide understood then, this was not a flirtation, not a dangerous crush on a handsome professor, not even simply desire, though desire was a roaring furnace in her blood. It was a threshold, a door that, once opened, could never be closed again. And if she crossed it, if she chose him, chose this, there would be no returning to who she had been before she found the photograph, before she had followed him home, before she had pressed her hand to his still chest. The fire burned lower, the shadows deepening in the corners of the room. The night deepened with them, pressing against the windows like a living thing. And still, she did not leave. Chapter 3. The Threshold. She did not leave. The choice settled into the room like a second heartbeat, invisible but present, pulsing in the heavy air between them. The fire cast long, flickering shadows that seemed to breathe with the weight of what hung unspoken. Alistair watched her as if waiting for the moment she would finally come back to herself. Laugh, apologize, and retreat into the safe, sterile world of fluorescent classrooms and annotated novels. where the dead stayed dead and professors were merely men with interesting cheekbones. She didn't. Instead, Adelaide stepped around him, not toward the door, but toward the fire. She needed its heat, craved something familiar to combat the strange, predatory coolness that seemed to emanate from him, from this house, and from the impossible truth now fluttering in her chest like a caged bird. "If I walk out," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the flames as they licked and curled around the ancient blackening logs, "you'll disappear." Yes. The word was simple. Absolute. No hesitation. No softening of the edges. "And I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I imagined you." She could already feel the shape of that haunting future, the years of gnawing doubt, the quiet moments in the archives when she would pull out that yearbook and stare at his frozen face, questioning her own sanity, her own pulse. Yes, the honesty was brutal. It sliced through any lingering illusion that this was a game, a mere flirtation, or a dangerous thrill she could walk away from unscathed. He was giving her the truth, unvarnished and sharp as a surgeon's blade. She turned to face him. The firelight caught the hard planes of his face, softening the severity of his features, and carving a deceptive warmth into shadows that were usually cold. He looked almost human in this light. Almost reachable. "I don't want to wonder." Something dark and conflicted moved behind his pale eyes, a storm held in check by 3 centuries of practice. His hands, which had been loose at his sides, curled into fists. Once, twice. Then he released them, the movement agonizingly slow. "You think certainty is kinder?" he asked. The question was a low murmur, but it filled the cavernous room. "No." She held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I think ignorance is." Certainty meant knowing exactly what he was, what he had done, and what he was capable of. Ignorance meant being haunted by a beautiful ghost for the rest of her days. She knew which one would slowly destroy her. The silence stretched between them, elastic and heavy. He studied her with an unnerving, microscopic intensity, as if searching for the exact fracture point in her resolve. His gaze moved over her face, her eyes, the curve of her mouth, the frantic pulse beating visibly in the hollow of her throat, and she felt it like a physical touch, cool and assessing against her heated skin. "You are romanticizing this," he said finally. "Immortality is not poetry. It is not twilight and longing and tragic beauty. It is hunger and loss, and the slow horror of watching everything you love turn to dust while you remain unchanged." "I'm not talking about immortality," she replied. His expression sharpened, a flicker of something unexpected crossing his features. Confusion? Curiosity? Perhaps even a spark of fear. "I'm talking about tonight." The air shifted. That changed everything. For the first time since she'd entered the house, he looked truly uncertain. The mask of ancient composure cracked, just slightly, revealing something raw and jagged beneath. He had prepared arguments against eternity, against the crushing weight of endless years. He had not prepared for this. For a woman who wanted nothing more than the visceral present. "You would risk everything," he said slowly, testing the words as if they were a foreign tongue. "For one night?" Her pulse jumped, a wild, rhythmic flutter in her chest, but her voice didn't waver. "Yes." A long, weighted pause followed. The fire crackled, a log collapsing into embers. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock ticked, measuring seconds that meant nothing to him and everything to her. "You do not know what I am capable of." His voice had dropped to a lower register, rougher and more resonant. "A warning. Then control yourself." His jaw tightened. The muscle jumped beneath the smooth, pale skin, and she watched him master himself, leashing the thing that stirred beneath his polished surface. "You assume I always can." The flicker in his eyes, brief, dark, and dangerous, sent a sharp thrill of fear through her. Good. Fear meant this was real. Fear meant she wasn't dreaming. Wasn't caught in some Gothic fantasy spun from too many nights reading Victorian novels by candlelight. Fear meant her body understood exactly what her heart was leaping toward. "Have you lost control before?" she asked. His gaze moved past her shoulder, toward something distant and invisible to her. The past, perhaps. Faces long turned to ash. Yes. Her stomach tightened. "Here? No." The word was sharp, definitive. "Never here." "When?" A pause. The shadows seemed to deepen around him, drawn to his gravity. "Long ago." "How many?" The question lingered too long, stretching into uncomfortable, bloody territory. His eyes came back to hers, and in them, she saw something she hadn't expected, a profound, ancient shame. "Enough," he said again, and there was a warning in it now, a door closing. "Enough that I stopped counting. Enough that I learned the necessity of sleep." She stepped closer anyway. The distance between them shrank to a few feet. She could feel the coolness radiating from him now, a strange and not unpleasant contrast to the fire's mounting warmth at her back. "You've had centuries," she said. You've learned restraint, yes. And you let me in. A beat of silence. I did, so trust yourself. His lips curved faintly, not in amusement, but in something darker. Something that looked almost like physical pain. You think this is about trust? Isn't it? No. His voice lowered, dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. It is about desire. The word moved through her like a slow-moving heat, spreading from her chest to her limbs, settling low and heavy in her belly. She had wanted him from the first moment she saw that photograph. She had wanted him in ways she hadn't allowed herself to name. Now, the wanting finally had a voice. You said you don't want anyone, she said softly. I do not. But you want me. His control flickered. She saw it. A jagged crack in the ancient armor, a flash of something raw and desperately hungry behind those pale eyes. Yes, there it was. Undeniable. The air between them felt thinner now, charged with an electricity that made her skin prickle with awareness. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic in her ears, could feel the heat rising from her body like a beacon in the dark. She moved closer again until she could feel the cool pressure of his presence, until the space between them was measured in inches rather than feet. You keep telling me to leave, she whispered, her voice trembling. But you're not moving away. He didn't answer. He didn't move. His chest rose and fell with breaths he didn't technically need to sustain life. His eyes were fixed on hers, dark and unreadable. But beneath that supernatural stillness, she could sense it. The tension, the agonizing restraint, the predator holding perfectly still. Why did you really wake up? She pressed. His expression hardened. I told you. No. She shook her head slowly, her hair brushing her shoulders. You told me you heard me. I did. That's not the same. She could feel it, the incompleteness of that explanation. Hearing someone doesn't pull you from a century of death-like sleep. Something else did. His eyes darkened. You think this is fate? I think, she said carefully, holding his gaze with everything she had, that you were waiting for something. The silence that followed was heavier than any before it. It pressed against her ears, against her skin, against the fragile, crumbling walls of her understanding. I do not wait, he said finally. The words were cold, but there was something beneath them. A definitive crack in the ice. You sleep. His gaze snapped back to hers, sharp and assessing. And that is different. Is it? She could see the tension building in him now, subtle but unmistakable. The predator was deciding not whether to strike, but whether to flee. His hands had curled into fists again. His jaw was set like iron. His eyes, those pale, ancient eyes, were darker than she had ever seen them. You should be frightened of me, he said quietly. Are you frightened of yourself? That hit. He went still. Completely, terrifyingly still. Not the stillness of a man holding his breath, but the stillness of something that had forgotten to breathe entirely. The firelight played across his face, but he might have been carved from marble. She stepped into him then, closing the last few inches of space. Her hand lifted again, resting against his chest. The fabric of his shirt was fine and cool beneath her fingers. Beneath it, she felt the hard, unyielding planes of muscle. And beneath that, nothing. No heartbeat. No rhythm. Just the strange, quiet stillness of something that should not exist. She rose onto her toes, her mouth inches from his, close enough to feel the cool whisper of his breath, close enough to see the individual lashes framing those impossible, silver-gray eyes. You haven't hurt me, she murmured. Not yet. Then don't. His restraint shattered. Not violently, not cruelly, but with a decisive, overwhelming gravity. His hand slid into her hair, cool fingers tangling in the warmth of her locks, and his mouth found hers. The kiss was not what she had expected. Not consuming, not feral, not the ravaging hunger of the monsters in her books. It was a controlled hunger. Deliberate. It was as if he were tasting memory as much as her, as if every sensation was being catalogued, savored, and archived after decades of sensory deprivation. His lips were cool against hers, but not cold. They moved with a predatory precision that made her knees weak, a slow, agonizing exploration that felt like it might last for hours. Her breath left her in a broken sound, a gasp, a moan, she didn't know which. His other hand settled at her waist, firm, but not trapping. She felt the strength there, immense and absolute, but it was leashed. Held back. She felt it. The choice in it. He could crush her. Could take whatever he wanted, could end her with a single thought. Instead, he held her like she was the most precious thing he had ever touched. The kiss deepened, slow and consuming. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't frantic. It was 300 years of patience poured into a single, devastating moment. She tangled her fingers in his shirt, fisting the cool fabric, and felt him tense, not in aggression, but in a battle of restraint. A shudder ran through him, barely perceptible, and she realized with a jolt of shock that he was fighting for control. He was fighting to stay gentle. He pulled back first. His eyes were darker now, not human dark. Something else lived there now, something vast and ancient, and dangerously hungry. But it was still leashed, still controlled. "You do not understand what proximity does," he murmured. His voice was rough, scraped raw by the effort of speaking. "Then tell me." "It amplifies." His thumb traced her lower lip, a feather-light caress that felt like fire. "Everything." "Everything?" "My hunger." The words came slowly, as if dragged from somewhere deep and dark. "Your desire." "Every sensation. Every heartbeat." His gaze dropped to her throat. Every pulse, her pulse, as if responding to his singular attention, hammered even harder. "You're not starving," she whispered. "No, but you're aware." "Yes." His thumb continued its slow, tortuous path along her lip, tracing the shape of her mouth as if memorizing it. "Agonizingly aware. And you still kissed me." "Yes." "Why?" He exhaled slowly, as if the answer cost him something irreplaceable. "Because I have denied myself for a very, very long time." The vulnerability in that confession hit harder than anything else. This was not the controlled professor, the ancient creature, or the predator in repose. This was something raw. Something that had been utterly alone for a very long time. She touched his face gently this time, her palm a warm contrast to the unexpected smoothness of his skin. He closed his eyes at the contact, just for a moment, and she saw something like grief cross his features. "You don't have to deny everything." "I do." His eyes opened, and they were clearer now, more human. "Or I become a monster." "You're not one." A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. "You have no measure for that. You see me through the lens of your novels, your romantic tragedies. You see the Byronic hero, not the creature who has knelt beside dying men and felt nothing but the pull of their blood." "Then give me a measure." His gaze sharpened. "You want truth?" "Yes. I feed from blood banks when I can. Animals when I must." His voice was flat, clinical. "I choose people who will not be missed when I fail." Her stomach turned. "When you fail." "It happens." No emotion. Just a cold fact of his existence. "And you just live with it?" His eyes went cold. "I endure it." She absorbed that. 3 centuries of memory. 3 centuries of guilt. 3 centuries of faces, names, and lives that ended because he had been hungry, because he had lost control, because he was simply what he was. "You think I am tragic," he said quietly. "I think you're lonely." That landed. She saw it hit him, the word, the undeniable truth of it. His jaw tightened. His eyes flickered away, toward the dying fire, toward the shadows, anywhere but her face. Silence stretched. The fire burned lower, the logs crumbling into glowing embers. "You will age," he said suddenly. The shift startled her. "Yes, you will wrinkle. You will weaken. You will feel your body betray you, year by year." His voice was quiet, but each word was precise, deliberate. "You will die." She swallowed hard. "Yes, and I will not." The words felt like a cold blade laid gently against her skin. A warning. A promise. "Unless," he added, her breath caught. "Unless what?" His gaze held hers, and in it she saw something she couldn't name. Hope? Fear? Longing? All of them, tangled together in a Gordian knot. "Unless I change you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air thickened, growing heavy with forbidden possibility. "Change me how?" "You know how." Her heart hammered violently against her ribs. She did know. She had known from the moment he admitted what he was. The thought had been there, lurking in the dark recesses of her mind, too terrifying to examine directly. "Say it." His jaw tightened. "I can give you what I am." The room went impossibly still. "You mean?" "Yes." The word fell like a heavy stone into still water, ripples spreading outward. Immortality. No aging. No death. An endless string of mornings, stretching forward into infinity. Her mind reeled. Images flashed through it. Herself, unchanged, watching her friends grow old and die. Watching her parents fade. Watching the entire world transform around her while she remained exactly as she was, a fixed point in a spinning universe. "And what does that cost?" she asked quietly. "Your humanity." "In what way?" His voice was gentle, but the words were merciless. "You will hunger. For blood, for warmth, for the life you can no longer have. You will lose the small things first. The pleasure of a sunrise, the comfort of sleep, the simple joy of being tired after a long day. Then you will lose the larger things. Fear. Guilt. Love. As you understand it now. You'll teach me?" "Yes." No hesitation. "You'll stay?" A pause. Yes, her chest tightened. For how long? His expression flickered. As long as you endure, and if I regret it, you will. The certainty in his voice sent a bone-deep chill through her. You don't sell this very well, she whispered. I am not trying to. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. I am trying to be honest, to give you the truth, so that when you choose, if you choose with open eyes. Silence returned. Her thoughts raced. No family, not eventually. No future career, not one that required aging gracefully into retirement. No aging parents to sit beside in hospitals, holding wrinkled hands. No children, no grandchildren. No sunlight without consequence. Stop, he said softly. She blinked. What? Your mind is spinning. I can see it. He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel his cool presence. You do not have to decide tonight. Is there no other way, she asked, to be with you? He looked at her for a long time. The firelight caught the silver in his hair, the shadows beneath his eyes, the faint scar beneath his lip. There is one. What? You remain human. And I love you until you die. The words sucked the air from her lungs. Love? She whispered. Yes. His voice was quiet, steady. I have loved before. Not often, not easily. But I know what it is, and I know, with a certainty that has nothing to do with logic, that I could love you. And then I sleep. The simplicity of it devastated her. You've done that before. Yes. How many times? His silence was answer enough. Tears burned unexpectedly at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, but not before he saw. His expression shifted, something tender finally breaking through the ancient reserve. You fall in love, she whispered. And then you outlive them. Yes. And you just keep going. I endure. The repetition of that word again. Endure. Not live. Not thrive. Endure. Is that what you want? She asked. To just endure? No. Then why offer it? Because it is the only way you remain you. His voice was soft, but it held the weight of centuries. If I change you, you will not be the woman who walked through my door tonight. You will be something else. Something that remembers being her, but is no longer her. And He stopped, his jaw working. What? And I do not know if I could bear losing you twice. The words cracked something open inside her. If I choose immortality, you will not remain you. In what way? He considered the question carefully. You will lose softness first, he said finally. The small kindnesses, the spontaneous laughter, the way you bite your lip when you're thinking. Then fear. Real fear, the kind that keeps you human. Then the small things that anchor you to morality. Guilt. Shame. Empathy. And you? I lost those long ago. She searched his face. She didn't believe that. The man who had warned her to leave, who had kissed her with such careful restraint, who spoke of love and loss with such raw honesty, that man had not lost his humanity. He had buried it, perhaps. Locked it away, but it was still there, flickering beneath the surface, like the last embers in the fireplace. Do you regret becoming this? She asked. Yes. The answer was immediate. Then why would you offer it to me? His voice dropped. Because I am selfish. The word cracked through her. You would damn me to avoid losing me. Yes. There it was. Not romance. Not destiny. Selfishness. Desire. Loneliness. Raw and unvarnished, and honest in a way that hurt to hear. Her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. This was not the confession she had expected. Not the grand romantic gesture. Not the declaration of undying love. Just truth. Ugly and beautiful and terrible. If I say no, she whispered, will you let me walk out? Yes. And you won't compel me? Or erase my memory? A faint, almost amused exhale. I cannot compel, and I would not erase you even if I could. Why not? Because you are the first thing in a century that has felt unexpected. His eyes held hers. The first thing that has made me want to wake up. Her breath trembled. And if I say yes? His gaze darkened. Then everything changes. Silence fell. Heavy. Irrevocable. She stepped back slightly, needing space to think. Her body still hummed from his kiss, from his nearness, but her mind was spinning. Immortality, or a finite love with a predetermined ending. Forever with him, but at the cost of herself. Or a lifetime, a single human lifetime, of loving him, knowing he would leave before the end. Do I have to decide tonight? She asked quietly. His expression shifted. Relief? Or dread? She couldn't tell. No. How long? I will remain for the semester. Her heart jolted. 4 months? Yes. And then I disappear. The words were gentle, but they cut. I will leave the university, leave this city, leave whatever we have become. I will sleep, and when I wake, decades will have passed. You will be, he stopped. Dead, she finished for him. Or old. Yes. The deadline settled between them like a ticking clock. 4 months. 120 days. To choose eternity or loss. He stepped toward her once more, slower now. His hand lifted, hovered near her face, then dropped without touching. You are not a child, he said softly. But you are young. Your brain is still forming, yourself still becoming. I will not rush you into a decision that will define the rest of your existence. Because you're noble? A faint, tired smile. Because if you choose me, if you choose this life, I need to know it was not an impulse. I need to know that you looked at everything, understood everything, and still chose. She studied him. And if I choose to stay human? His voice lowered. Then we love recklessly. The word echoed through her, recklessly. Without caution. Without planning for the end. Without holding back. And when I start to age, I will leave before you see it in my face. Pain flared in her chest, sharp and immediate. That's cruel. It is mercy. His eyes held hers, and in them she saw the ghosts of others. You deserve to be remembered as you are, not as you become. No. She shook her head slowly. It's cowardice. His eyes flashed. You think watching you decay would be easier? The rawness in his voice stunned her. You think standing beside you while your hair turns white and your skin wrinkles and your eyes grow dim? You think that is something I could do and remain sane? I would stay, she said. I would want you to stay. You say that now. I would. His jaw tightened. You cannot imagine what it is to watch everyone you love die, to hold their hands as they take their last breaths, knowing you will go on. To bury children, grandchildren, to walk through cemeteries where every headstone bears a name you loved. Silence. They stood on opposite edges of the same abyss, looking across at each other. You're asking me to choose between my life and my death, she whispered. I am asking you to choose your nature. His voice was gentle, but the words were absolute. To decide what you are willing to become, and what you are willing to lose. The fire burned low, embers glowing orange in the darkness. Outside, the night deepened toward dawn. 4 months, she said finally. Yes. I stay human for now. His shoulders loosened slightly. The tension that had been coiling in him since she arrived seemed to ease, just a fraction. And we see what this is. She met his gaze. We see what we become, and if it becomes unbearable, it will, he said quietly. There was no drama in the word. Just fact. She met his gaze, then we endure. For the first time since she had stepped into the house, he smiled. Not amused. Not predatory. But something almost warm. Something that made him look, for just a moment, like the man in the photograph. Young. Hopeful. Human. Very well, Adelaide. He lifted her hand slowly to his lips, pressing a cool, deliberate kiss to her knuckles. His eyes held hers over her hand, and in them, she saw something that made her breath catch. Not hunger. Not desire. Something rarer. Reverence. 4 months. The clock somewhere in the house began to chime. Midnight. A threshold crossed, and neither of them would leave unchanged. Chapter 4. What remains? The semester did not pass gently. It burned with the slow-motion intensity of a fuse leading toward an inevitable explosion. From the outside, nothing appeared unusual. Professor Alistair Vale lectured with the same precise cadence, the same unnerving stillness at the front of the room. Female students still leaned forward unconsciously, drawn by the gravity of his voice. They still blushed when he corrected them. They still lingered after class, hoping for a crumb of his attention. But he never looked at them. He looked at Adelaide. Not often, and never obviously, but enough that the air between them felt physically weighted. They became careful, practicing a silent choreography of avoidance. No public touches. No lingering conversations in empty lecture halls. No digital messages that could be discovered by prying eyes. At night, she went to him, moving through the modern world like a secret. Always after dark. Always through the side gate of the Victorian house he had inhabited since the 20s, its dark shingled walls hiding them from the hum of the city. He never fed from her. Not once. That restraint became its own form of intimacy, a tension so thick it felt like a third presence in the room. Instead of the hunger, he gave her the truth. He taught her not the dry bones of literature, but the visceral reality of himself. He showed her the hidden cellar beneath the house. Cool, damp stone, lined with sealed cases of carefully stored blood. It was hospital surplus acquired quietly through forged channels and old favors. He explained the logistics of a life lived in the margins, teaching her how to survive without becoming a predator of the streets. He showed her the journals he kept, volumes of handwriting evolving across decades of paper. Names were written in elegant script, some crossed out, dates of deaths noted with a chilling, clinical precision. "Why write them down?" she asked once, her fingers tracing a page from a century ago. "So they do not disappear," he said, his voice a low vibration in the quiet library. "You remember them, though." "Yes. Every face. Every voice." "Then why record it?" His gaze softened faintly, a rare crack in his porcelain mask. "Memory changes, Adelaide. It softens the edges of pain and gilds the past in false gold. Ink does not. It holds the truth exactly as it was, long after the heart has tried to forget." She learned his rhythms, the strange stasis of his existence. He did not sleep like she did. He entered a state of stillness, something like suspended animation, only when he chose. He avoided sunlight, though brief exposure did not turn him to ash. It simply weakened him, slowing his thoughts and making his movements heavy, as if he were walking through deep water. He could hear her heartbeat from across the house. He always knew when she was afraid, the frantic thump-thump of her pulse acting as a beacon in the dark. Yet he never lost control, not once. And slowly, dangerously, what began as an obsession became something steadier. He listened to her talk about her thesis for hours. He asked real questions, challenging her arguments and teasing her interpretations of Milton. He would stand behind her while she cooked, watching the steam rise, pretending not to notice that he did not need to eat, simply to be near the warmth she radiated. For the first time in 300 years, he lived beside someone in the present tense. Adelaide stopped thinking in deadlines. The 4 months agreement felt less like a countdown and more like a bridge they were building together over an abyss. Until one night, with only 3 weeks left in the semester, she found him in the study, motionless. He wasn't resting or thinking, he was waiting. The streetlights outside filtered through the stained glass, casting patterns of amethyst and amber across his face. "You're leaving," she said softly. Yes, the word was heavy, a finality that didn't wound as much as it anchored her. "Have you decided?" he asked. She crossed the room slowly, her footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs. "You haven't asked me again." "I will not," he said. "To ask is to persuade. I want you to choose life if there is even a fraction of doubt. I will not have your eternity stained by the regret of a girl who didn't know what she was throwing away." She stopped in front of him. "There isn't any doubt." Something flickered in his eyes, a flash of stormy gray. "Adelaide, you will lose your family. They will mourn a daughter who still walks the earth. Yes, your friends. You will watch them grow old and wither, while you remain a statue. Yes, children." A pause stretched between them, thick and aching. "Yes," she whispered. "You will watch centuries unravel. You will outlive nations. You don't know what eternity does to love. It erodes it. It turns passion into a habit, and a habit into a burden." She stepped closer, into his space. "Has it? In all these years, have you forgotten how to feel?" Silence was his only answer, and it was enough. She reached for his hand, cool, familiar, and steady. "You said you regretted becoming this," she reminded him. "I do. I'm not choosing this because I think it's beautiful, Alistair. I'm choosing it because I would rather have centuries with you than decades without you." The air in the room stilled. The distant hum of a passing car felt like it belonged to another planet. "You say that now," he whispered. "I've said it every day in my head for months. I've lived 100 lifetimes in this study already." He searched her face for hesitation, for a tremor of fear. He found none. "You will change," he said quietly. "So will you. You already have." She took his hand and placed it against her chest, directly over her thudding heart. "You woke up. You fell in love." His expression fractured at that word. "I did not intend to." "I know, neither did I." She swallowed hard. "I'm not afraid of becoming what you are. You should be." "I'm not." He looked at her the way someone looks at the sun before stepping into it, with a mixture of reverence and total surrender. "One last time," he said softly. "You may walk away. Go back to the world. Forget me." She shook her head. "No." The decision settled between them, not reckless or impulsive, but certain. Alistair's hand trembled. For the first time since she'd known him, the indomitable man trembled. "Once done," he said, his voice lower than she had ever heard it. "There is no returning. I will take your life, Adelaide, and I will give you mine." "I know." He brushed his thumb over her cheek, a gesture of devastating tenderness. "I will not let you suffer." "You can't promise that." "No," he admitted. "But I will try." She smiled faintly. "That's enough." He kissed her then. It wasn't a kiss of hunger, but one of profound reverence. It was a seal on a contract written in the dark. When his mouth left hers, he rested his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. "I love you," he said. The words were quiet, unadorned and true. Her breath broke. I know. His lips curved into the ghost of a smile. That is not the customary response. She laughed softly through the tension, a sound of youthful, defiant heat. I love you too. The house felt like it had that very first night, holding its breath, waiting for the world to change. He guided her gently to the velvet settee near the fireplace. Look at me, he said. She did. His eyes shifted, darkening as the restraint he had maintained for centuries dissolved, not into savagery, but into a desperate necessity. He pressed one final kiss to her mouth, then moved to her throat. His voice against her skin was barely a sound. I will be careful. I trust you. His fangs pierced her skin. Pain flared, sharp, blinding, and hot, and then came the warmth. It wasn't weakness or a fading out. It was an expansion. Her heartbeat thundered wildly, a drum reaching a crescendo, and then it began to slow. The room blurred. She felt him pull back before she slipped too far into the dark. She felt the cool pressure of his wrist at her mouth. Drink, he commanded softly. She hesitated for only a fraction of a second before she obeyed. His blood was nothing like she expected. It was iron and night, memory and firelight, centuries of existence collapsing into her veins. The world shattered into a million burning pixels, and then it reformed. Silence. When she opened her eyes, everything was louder and impossibly sharper. She could hear the individual logs splitting in the hearth. She could hear the wind scraping against the window panes like a living thing. She could hear his breathing. No, not breathing. Stillness. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw what he saw. She saw the faint, golden pulse beneath skin. She felt the warmth of living things, moving beyond the walls. She perceived the fragile, fleeting rhythm of human life as a distant, frantic hum. Her own heartbeat was gone. She inhaled instinctively, but the air felt unnecessary, a habit she no longer required. How do you feel? He asked. The question was careful, laced with a fear she had never heard in him before. She sat up slowly. The room tilted, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming clarity of her new senses. She searched for the word. He waited, motionless as a statue. Awake, she finally said. Something broke in his expression then. Not restraint, but a profound, soul-deep relief. You're not in pain? No. Hunger? She paused. There it was, low, present, and demanding, but controlled. Yes, she said honestly. He nodded once. That is normal. We will manage it. She studied her hands. They looked unchanged, yet they felt unbreakable. She looked at him again. He looked almost afraid to hope. She stood, moving toward him with a fluid speed that startled her. He stilled as she cupped his face. I'm still me, she whispered. He searched her eyes desperately for loss, for the absence of the girl he had fallen for. He found neither. You are, he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. And I'm not alone. His hands slid around her waist, holding her as if she might shatter, even though they both knew she was now as enduring as he was. I will not let you become what I was, he promised. I will not let the years hollow you out. You don't have to, she replied, leaning into him. You don't have to endure the silence anymore, Alistair. The word struck him. Endure. For centuries, that had been his only setting. Now it didn't have to be. He kissed her again, and this time, there was no countdown. No semester deadline. No approaching decay. Outside, the world of 2026 continued its frantic, fleeting rhythm. Seasons would change, the university would evolve, and generations would rise and disappear into the ink of his journals. But inside the quiet Victorian house, two figures stood before the fire. Unaging. Unhidden. No longer sleeping through the centuries, and no longer alone. For the first time in 300 years, Alistair did not dread tomorrow, because tomorrow, and every tomorrow after, she would be there. Choosing forever isn't an easy decision, but subscribing to the channel is. If you enjoyed this journey through the dark, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What did you think of Adelaide's choice? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of the unaging. See you in the next one.